basically, the pain gap is about medical gaslighting. It's about women's pain not being believed, not taken seriously, us being labeled hysterical and written off, and almost always it's a serious medical issue.
You bring so much light to something that's not talked about often, and I love the dynamic and really clear way that you talk about these issues and make them so relevant.
If you're educated and you are a certain socioeconomic level, you at least have some ability to advocate for yourself. There's a language barrier, there's an education barrier, there's a financial component that precipitously and exponentially drops off.
I would tell your wife and other South Asian women that are listening to this podcast is you're not an inconvenience. You are not an inconvenience. Even if you have been told that you are, even if you've been shown that you are not.
I am so excited about our show today.
I am too. We just had probably one of the most fun pre-shows with someone who's a DC native, a local, more local to DC than I am.
Yeah, I think it's so cool to have all these incredible guests on. They're doing incredible things. And today we have on Anushay Hossain, who is a devoted women's healthcare researcher and advocate. She's also the host of the podcast, The Pain Gap. And you've probably seen some of her work and insightful commentary on gender, politics, race on CNN, MSNBC, PBS, Forbes, and all sorts of other amazing publications. Anushay, welcome to the show.
Welcome. What is going on with the pain gap?
I think the best place to start is by explaining what the pain gap is. Do you know what the pain gap is, Dinesh?
No, I do not.
Do you, Seema?
I can make an assumption, and I try really hard not to do that.
Oh, I love making assumptions. But the pain gap is the difference in how we view, measure, and diagnose pain between the sexes, between men and women. And basically, the pain gap is about medical gaslighting. It's about women's pain not being believed, not taken seriously, us being labeled hysterical and written off, and almost always it's a serious medical issue. There are countless stories, especially now that we have the word and the language for that term. Before there was no word for medical gaslighting. It was just the white doctor thought I was crazy. I don't know if he was racist or sexist or both. But also why it's so important to believe women in healthcare and how the legacy of hysteria still impacts women's medical diagnosis to this day. A lot of people think the book is actually about my own personal story, almost dying giving birth in America in one of the best hospitals in the DC area. But it's not. It's about all women's stories, but also the serious lack of research in women's health, the knowledge gap, the credibility gap, and the pain gap. But I will say before I make the whole show about my favorite topic, which is women's health, the reason I put my own story in the book is because I was born and raised in Bangladesh, and when we were growing up in the 80s and 90s, it was all about America and how they came in, introduced public health, help reduce our maternal mortality rates. I mean, all about giving women access to contraception and family planning so they can choose smaller families and have access to higher, better educated jobs. And now America has the highest maternal mortality rate amongst rich nations, and it's rising. But why is that important? What is maternal mortality numbers? What do they tell us? They tell us the number of women dying in childbirth, but they also are an indicator recognized by the World Health Organization to indicate how well a country's healthcare system is functioning. What's the overall position of women in society? Because if in the year 2024, we are letting women in the world's richest democracy die in childbirth, something we know how to prevent, something we have all the resources for, we've had all the knowledge about, and we're letting it happen. And why is the difference in the numbers between the races so big? And I just want to give this one statistic, because a lot of people think that all my work is just about maternal health, which a big chunk of it is, because it's a really, really important indicator we can't be dismissive of. But the other thing is, we often hear the statistic that Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die giving birth in America than their white counterparts. But put another way, that's 243% more likely. So we can talk about this later, but the race issue in my book and in America is not a side note. It's not a bug. It's like the feature. It's a big deal to put the title, that word in the title. But I think I was lucky because it was happening around the George Floyd times of 2020, 2021. You young kids listening to this, I just have to put that in there because that really kind of made it okay. And it was pretty recent to say, this is racist out loud on major platforms. Before we would have to say other crap, pardon my language, but racism, racist. And my publisher even told me that if I had tried to write this book 10 years earlier, they wouldn't have been able to put racism in it.
Wow. Yeah. That's incredible. And, you bring so much light to something that's not talked about often. And I love the dynamic and really attention, the clear way that you talk about these issues and make them so relevant. But, you mentioned something that caught my attention. You said, I had my own story. And that's what so take us back, because you didn't just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to talk about this. You had an evolution. You had your own experiences. So take us back, take the listeners back to where this all came from.
I love that question so much. And you know what? I do have my own story, which I will tell you, but I do want to preface it with just to all the women and the men, to everyone listening to this podcast. I'm going to tell you my story, but what I really want everybody to do is listen and believe women in your life when they tell you a story. Because we aren't believed. It's not just women are not believed about our health. We're not believed about our body. We're not believed if we say we've been sexually harassed. We're not believed if we say this guy raped me. We have to prove it. And then we have to be a perfect patient, a perfect witness, a perfect everything. So the other thing is, a big part of my work is I am obsessed now with women's stories. And when I started researching my book, it's like a whole thing. And when you get the contract, you're like, great. And then you're like, oh my God, I have to write this book. What do you do? So one of the first things I did was I started talking to women. I started my research there. And every woman has a story. Every woman has a doctor story. If she doesn't have one, she knows somebody. So I just became obsessed with, what do women not talk about? Even today. And you know why? Oftentimes women won't even freaking believe each other. So my thing before I tell my story is always just give the women in your life the basic respect of believing them. Because I know why women keep their stories quiet. Right? Seems like they're not going to be believed.
Yeah.
But yeah, quickly to get to my story. So when I was growing up in Bangladesh, even though I went to the American school and all this stuff, I really didn't think that it was possible to die in childbirth in America, because they had kind of, in my childhood, stopped it in Bangladesh. And, in the 80s, it was really happening. I mean, it was something that touched you. It wasn't just like, oh, you've heard about women dying in childbirth. It was happening a lot. And my childhood nanny actually died in childbirth. And she was one of the few people who actually had decent health care, because that's just something my mom decided to do. So something else I talk about in the book is how random it was for me growing up, what woman got access to health care. It wasn't for everyone. It was for the very rich and the very privileged. And even they would take the first plane out, right? If they could afford to, take you to London, take you to Singapore, take you to Bangkok. So the concept of health as a right was something uniquely American for me when I was young. So when I was giving birth in Washington, D.C., with my husband, one of the best hospitals, and I'm a policy analyst on Capitol Hill, and I work on global health legislation. I mean, this was my field, and I did not know about America's maternal health crisis. So I go to the hospital, and very long story short, I was in labor for 33 hours, and I had asked for epidural, straight up. And, I did not want to deal with the pain that comes with childbirth. I didn't think I was going to be able to handle it. Well, guess what? I am able to handle it. Turns out that they hooked me up to the epidural, and even though every time I told them I can feel everything, okay, there's no pain medicine there, legal limit, we can't do anything. Then I get a fever, I'm shaking, and by the way, we're asking for help. It was like the hospital was understaffed, but it was also very much like you are not a priority. So by then I am shaking when finally I get to see a doctor. And by the way, you don't always get to deliver with the doctor that you have been seeing the whole time of your pregnancy. You don't know who's going to be on call and whatnot. The entire system is actually really misogynistic and messed up if you think about it. But anyhow, so then it was like, she has an infection. We have to get the baby at emergency C-section, okay? And I'm in so much pain. And finally, I'm like, there is something wrong, okay? So finally, they call in the anesthesiologist. And guess what? I'm not hooked up to the epidural. The needle had slipped out. I hadn't gotten any pain, even though I have a baby stuck between my legs, okay? Labor is not progressing. And a lot of people think that you go to the hospital and the baby just comes out. No, you're in labor, okay? So I have been in labor for over 30 hours. Time to do this emergency C-section. And when they roll me into the operating room, the operating theater, and the doctor on duty that night, never seen him in my life, he didn't believe that I was in pain. He wanted me to get up from the stretcher and get on the bed myself. He did not believe it. Okay, and by the way, as you can see, my
brain is still processing this because I'm reliving my own story, and it's not that this happened, but I'm just trying to figure out what I would have even done in this situation.
Yeah, well, me too. Because as you can see and tell that, I'm ready to stand up for myself, but I was so scared. First of all, I was trying to be the perfect patient. And then at the moment when hopefully I'm finally about to get like the relief or the assistance that I need, it was amazing to not be believed. This man didn't see my humanity. And I'm literally at my most vulnerable. Anyhow, finally he believed me because I cannot move. I'm shaking. Everyone's like, we've got to get this procedure going. And anyway, I had my baby. Everything, I guess, was fine. But nobody talked to me about my birth trauma. Nobody talked to me about so much of the language that we have now. But I think about that doctor even now, even after writing the book, every day. I think about him every day. I want to still know if it was because he's so sexist or is it because he's so racist? Which one was it that didn't let you see me as fully human, that it masked my humanity for you? That's what I really want to know. And I really feel like as women of color, that's what we really have to navigate. And guess what? The answer is probably both. It is sexism and it is racism. So that's why I wrote it, because it's not just like, oh, I have a headache and I went to the doctor and he didn't believe me. It's like women are, and by the way, that headache might be a tumor. It's because I, as a feminist and someone who has devoted her whole career to women's health and rights, there's just no point fighting for anything. There's no point fighting for our right to vote or anything if people don't give a shit whether you die or not. Preventable, needless. We know how to save women's lives. So what's happening in America is very important, not just because it's inherently screwed up, inherently messed up, but because a lot of Americans don't understand what goes in. This is when being a DC local is great. What happens in American domestic politics can always be implemented abroad through America's aid and foreign policy. And America has been giving the world its messed up, violent abortion politics, has been basically exporting this to the world through the global gag rule, the Mexico City policy, which is one of the oldest U.S. foreign policies, which basically states that any foreign NGO that gets any U.S. government money cannot advocate or refer you for abortion. So if you get any American funding overseas, and this is probably not a big deal for a country like Sweden because they probably don't take any American aid money for health. But a country like Bangladesh does, a country like Pakistan does. And so what does that mean? That means that, Seema, you come into my clinic in Bangladesh, a rural clinic, which is usually the ones that the US government supports. And I know if I tell you to go have an abortion, it will save your life. If I can see you're having an ectopic pregnancy, I even know where you can go. I even know where to tell you to go to get this safe abortion, but I can't because I lose my funding, my US funding. And it's not just money, it's technical assistance, it's stuff like computers and printers. So this kind of stuff is really, really important that I think Americans don't get, because a lot of South Asian women, or even women from Bangladesh, will say to me, well, that's great that you're fighting for women's health in America. What about how's that going to impact all of us? Actually, it does.
It does.
It really, really does. And it's very important because so many Americans are unaware. And, you know, we know what it's like, even if we are not living in the motherland anymore. We know how powerful U.S. foreign policy is. Who are the Americans going to back? Who are they going to X, Y, Z, whatever. But we really don't understand each piece of language that is put into these bills and what they can tag on to other bills, by the way. You can get a lot of breast cancer research passed if you tag it onto the military spending bill. So this is something I really think that as South Asian Americans, we're getting better at, but we really need to get with it. We really need to understand, because there's so much happening right here in Washington. And I'm personally really tired of old white men telling me what I can do or can't do and what pregnancy I have to have or can't have. And now they're starting to tell all women that, so that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, as you were talking, I never really thought of it this way, but as you were sharing your story, it made me realize of an instance that, you know, you said you either know someone or don't, right? I feel that what you went through was terrible. And I think that there's a socioeconomic component to it, to where if you're educated and you are a certain socioeconomic level, you at least have some ability to advocate for yourself. But if there's a language barrier, there's an education barrier, there's a financial component, that precipitously and exponentially drops off. But I also think another component of what you're describing, you mentioned racism and sexism, but I think it is also of dire urgence when ageism comes into play. And, you know, my mom just suffered about 3 years ago bilateral bisphosphonate fractures, right? And are you familiar with bisphosphonate fractures?
No, but I love hearing people's health stories. I really do.
So she was prescribed, she had osteoporosis like most South Asian women, right? Or osteopenia. And she was prescribed Fosamax. And Fosamax, you're supposed to take it for like 3 years and go on a drug holiday. And the manufacturers of Fosamax were sued for this. And over 20 years, it can actually have the opposite effect of mineralizing and making your bones really brittle.
Oh my goodness.
So she was on it for a very long time. And her legs started hurting to the point where she would like draw on her thighs and identify the place where she was having pain. And I never thought of that, you know, what the concepts you were talking about were at play here. But she would go to her primary care physician and other folks and say, my legs are hurting. And I'm not sure whether some of this might actually be going on because she's in her 80s. She's a minority and she is a female, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think if you're going to, whatever system you are, whoever you are, if you're going to ignore someone because they're a person of color or from a minority background or a certain demographic or a language, second language, or a woman, it's not hard to expect that, you know, as age comes into play, that you would also discount their tolerance of pain or things like that.
Yeah. Oh, completely. And you know what else is so interesting? You bring up the story about your mother, but like since COVID, my parents live in Bangladesh and I really just took over all their health. I was like, I'm going to manage your guys' health. You guys are fired. This is terrible. Everybody comes to Washington, D.C. once a year and I'm managing everything. But and they're just like that. They're very educated. Their English is not, you know, the best. They don't really understand. And I was just telling my husband, I'm like, they're going to have to do this for your parents. Or I'm like, oh God, am I going to have to do this for your parents? But it's so important. It's something I actually say in the book. Whatever age you are, one thing that women really said helps is taking somebody with you to the doctor's office.
Yeah.
And especially if you take a man. I really hate, like in my talks, when people ask me, well, what can we do? The onus shouldn't be on women, but in the meantime, it is. I can't tell you how many women have told me taking a friend or their male partner in the doctor's office, just somebody who can vouch for you and say, yeah, I have seen her not being able to speak, or whatever it is. But I also think just in general, that's something very good to do. And I especially think, especially for our immigrant aging parents, if I can make a PSA for brown people, please don't let your loved ones go to the doctor on their own, because for a really long time, we were made to believe that it was us, or it was you were the problem. This is like a one-off. And now we know it's a systemic problem. We haven't been able to talk about it because race is really difficult to talk about in America. But quite frankly, it's all I ever want to talk about because it's in everything. And I also want to say that the American medical system is functioning the way it was intended to function, right? It's supposed to value certain lives way more than others. You want to Google something, Dinesh? Google the racist history of America's healthcare system, who they tested on, who they developed the speculum on, and whatnot on slaves who didn't have any agency or with no pain management. The father of gynecology, J. Marion Sims, tested on hundreds of Black women. The three of their names that we know, Anarcha, Betsy, and Lucy. They had no agency in what was, he's the father of gynecology. What about these mothers of gynecology? Did they have any say in what was tested and what was done to them? And by the way, a lot of things that a lot of procedures that he perfected on these slave women, he went then to Europe and performed them on white women with anesthesia. So it's not just, Anushay woke up one day and decided that pain is a problem. It's women's pain in America, in the world, but really in America, is political. It's political, it's historic, and we're not allowed to express it. It's a very unique emotion in the sense that really globally, but also in America, we don't like seeing angry women, but it's really an emotion that men own.
So, Anushay, you say too that the pain crisis that we're having it also plays a role in reflecting how we are from a mental health status.
Yes.
Right. So can you share more about that? Now, obviously, if you're in chronic pain or you're, not being believed, that can impact your mental health. But I just wanted to kind of hear from you, and so our listeners can hear from you. Say more about that, particularly as it relates to us as South Asian Americans and members of the South Asian diaspora.
It's so funny that you asked me that question, because I am also obsessed with South Asian pain. And because this is a brown podcast, can we just get an amen for Are We the Culture? Just to be quiet about it all. Your strength will just I don't know, carry you through. I actually think that we have such a fascinating relationship with pain. South Asian men and South Asian women. We are really programmed for a very young age and told to have a high tolerance for it. That it's just a part of like our suffering. I can't tell you for how long when I first got my menstrual cycle when I was a young girl, no painkillers were offered to us. My mom was just like, this is the practice of being a woman. And then I told somebody in school, thank God I went to the American school, and they were like, oh my God, girl, take a Midol. I'm like, wow, they have medication for periods in America. By the way, now you can just take Tylenol or whatever you want. I do want to say about chronic pain, because the majority of people who suffer from chronic pain are women. And I think one of the reasons, going back to research, why it's so important is that a lot of this research on women in pain have actually been done on men. And for so long, we've just considered women smaller men with ovaries. But guess what, guys? They're completely different. So even the mice that they are doing the testing for chronic pain on are men, are male. So what is actually happening now is very exciting, because a lot of things that I talk about people think are doom and gloom and depressing, but women's health is not depressing. It is so exciting because there's so much crap we still don't know, but it's all like solvable. There's so much research being done now, and they finally accepting women as our own entity. I mean, we absorb things differently. We absorb medications differently. I don't know if you followed this thing with Ambien. In 2018, they put Ambien out in the market, and they had not tested it on women. They tested it on men, and they released it onto the market, and then all these women are getting into car accidents. It turns out women who take Ambien need 8 hours longer to process it. So there's so many things. So the thing about chronic pain, I mean, I know I took this my answer to research, which is really important, but I do think that with chronic pain, South Asians and women, we still expect women to suffer. We really, really do. And I don't think enough women. I know too many women in my own family that do not go to the doctor about their ailments, about their grievances. And I think in America, it's easier to access sometimes. I mean, the whole insurance system is also something else. But I do feel like in South Asia we have to, maybe also in America, we have to cross the threshold of accepting that women are allowed to express their pain and be really fucking angry about it. Because most women, pardon my French, my larger issue is with how we still view women's pain, which can lead to women's anger and rage, as something that women are not allowed to be. That in itself is considered almost an angry woman, a hysterical woman. So even though, this is a big issue for me. As you can see, I'm kind of obsessed with the concept of pain, but I don't know how to answer that question because I'm kind of dedicated my whole life to figuring that out.
You're in it still.
I'm in it. I'm still trying to figure it out. But the good news is that with the Women's Health Initiative, this has finally kind of been identified and picked up now by the White House. I do have a lot of hope because it wasn't until the 1990s that the FDA or the NIH, the National Institute of Health, even had mandates to include women in clinical trials. That is so crazy. Why would you not, even for things like uterine cancer? Like you don't even have it. So it's very much about us really not being viewed 100% human. It's very human to need what we're like fighting for. And I don't understand why it's so complicated. But I think a lot of it has to do with we are not viewed as fully human in America or back in the motherland.
I mean, I'm listening to everything you say, and it makes perfect sense. And yet, it is not something that is sort of like accepted as a mainstream problem, right? Or talked about in a way that people should know about. And I'm wondering, why is that? Why is it taking so long for these types of conversations to be had?
I think that's a great question. And I think it's because white women are having these conversations very differently. White women are a whole other demographic, guys. We'll talk about them on a different podcast. But, I think this election, they might be voting different. But in the past, it was college-educated white women that got Trump in, right? They all backed him. So I think that white women in America don't have the same kind of agenda as but priorities as women of color do, because they've benefited from white supremacy and racism, right? They do. And they can also see how it might be bad for other people. And this is a generalization, guys. I love my white girlfriends. They're great. This is not even an attack on Karens. This is very general. This is someone who's spent my entire life studying gender and race. It's like my favorite things to talk about. I think now women of color coming into the conversation, and it's not just happening this year, it's kind of been happening in the last 5 to 10 years in a very different way, right, Seema? I mean, I even tell my girls, there's some stuff you say now you could not say even a couple of years ago, right? So, and I'm wide open and very, I talk without a filter, but hey, I got in trouble for it too. I've been punished for it as well. So I think it's women of color. I think Black women are leading us, who are finally like, there is something really wrong here because women are dying. They're dying from it. And I always tell people that by the time a woman goes to the doctor or to the emergency room, she has probably been in pain, right, Seema? I mean, I don't have any studies on this. I guarantee she's been in pain for a long time. It wasn't just like in 20, by the time women make that decision to go to the doctor. But this is also a larger pattern we're seeing, because the lack of people of color doctors and keeping that talent, retaining that talent is a really big problem. They're even finding in medical schools in America, there's lots of stuff, racist things that are being taught in your textbooks that have been proven to be untrue. Like a University of Virginia study that found about 26%, I'm going to say 26%, but it was a UVA study done in 2016 about how doctors are still taught that Black people have thicker skin, so they experience pain differently, that their nerve endings are different, so they don't experience pain as intensely. And you can totally tell that this was some crap from either Jim Crow or the slavery days, but it's still in the book. A Black baby has more chances of surviving if the doctor delivering the baby is Black. There's what's really fascinating, I think, about the time that we're living in now is that a lot of things I think that women knew, or people of color, things that we kind of had a feeling about, there's studies now to back it. And I want to say one other thing about Black women, because honestly, they are, I think everybody in America should bow down to them. I think everybody in America should give them their respect, because they have, first of all, they're not only the canaries in the coal mine, but usually they have suffered the most. It's like Malcolm X who said the most disrespected person in America is a Black woman. And it's so true. And for years, they were blamed for America's maternal health crisis. They were like, well, it's a Black maternal health crisis, and it's the Blacks. And really racist things like, well, Black women are welfare moms and they're not educated. This major study came out that said not that a Black woman who has college education or higher is 5 times more likely to die giving birth in America than a white woman with a high school degree. And then this year, a major study came out that said that wealth, not even wealth, will protect the richest Black people from possibly dying in the medical setting. And then you have women like Beyonce and Serena Williams who came forward with their story.
Yes.
Padma Lakshmi is in my book. Padma Lakshmi, it took her over 20 years to get a diagnosis for her endometriosis. She actually said that Salman Rushdie, that was a major reason for their divorce, because she wouldn't want to have sex. There, we talked about sex, guys. But that was like a thing that led to their breakdown in marriage, because he didn't believe how much pain she was in. And she finally, this was Padma Lakshmi, when she finally found a doctor who believed her. Past doctors had said that she doesn't have a high threshold for pain, that these are just very bad period menstrual cramps. She had stage 4 endometriosis. Do you know how much pain this woman was living with? So it's not, I mean, I'm trying to get the stories of everyday women, but if this is happening to powerful women, some of the most powerful women, oh my God, Oprah with her menopause. Everybody thought she had a heart disorder with her palpitations. She went to 5 different heart specialists. Do you know what access this woman has to the top doctors? They're only the best. Nobody mentioned menopause or anxiety palpitations to her. Everybody thought it was something wrong with her heart. So this is another thing which I really love. Now women are coming forth with their stories. I'm trying to uncover as many as I can, but I love women coming forward with their stories, because it doesn't, when a woman tells her story, it's not like, oh, thanks for sharing. No, she is showing you how widespread a problem is. I can't tell you, and love to my white peeps, love to my Goras, but when the book came out and I was doing press for it, how many white women asked me, well, have you ever thought that maybe it was just you? Have you ever thought that maybe this was a one-off or a bad experience? And I always was like, wow, this is so fascinating to me. And I'm like, well, this is why I think it's so important for women to speak up, because then you know how widespread an element. Because yes, I actually kept my story to myself for years. I honestly, and I used to ask my husband, I was like, it's really that bad? And he was such an important witness. He was my most important witness, because he was there. He was like, no, you were shaking, you were this. At one point you were asking for, like, he remembers so many things. So it's like women's credibility has been eroded for so long. We don't even believe ourselves. We don't even know how to believe each other. But we have to keep sharing these stories. I really want to hear yours, Seema.
I mean, I'm happy to share. I'm just in a little bit, not because I haven't shared before. I've absolutely shared publicly. But yeah, I mean, after my first child, I totally thought that there was something wrong with me. Like many women, you question, why can't I just figure this out? There's, something wrong with me, but there was something seriously not right. But I kept trying to fool myself. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to add more. And I also told myself that I was making things up. And my whole postpartum life was very, very, very difficult for about 2 years. And I was in a very dark place. There was a lot of frustration. There was at one point, I found myself screaming at my 5-month-old because he had gotten woken up by something else. And I was so exhausted. I had no resources at that moment. And it was an out of body experience, right? Of like, what are you doing? Why are you, this is what you wanted, this sweet, beautiful, healthy baby boy with a man that you love and consensually created this life with. There's a lot that goes there, right? So I had to learn to advocate for myself, even with my husband, who he is a pediatric critical care physician, one of the most supportive, loving men on the planet that I've ever met. And he too was like, maybe you're just tired. Maybe you're just, like he didn't know. And I say that with a lot of compassion because he himself was exhausted. He himself had other things going on, and we were both just trying to keep our heads above water. And anyway, it was a beautiful story and is a very empowering story because honestly, I would not be sitting here in front of you and Dinesh today had it not been for me advocating for myself, not listening to the medical doctor, because that was the other thing is it's like, oh, but you're a doctor and your husband's a doctor. And yet you're telling me, oh, your CBC is fine. Your this is fine. Your that's fine. And I'm like, no, there's something wrong. I had to go outside of Western medicine. And, rely on yoga, breath work, meditation, acupuncture to really break free and heal. And I'm grateful for the experience, really, truly. But I also recognize that I'm saying that with a lot of privilege, right? I had education, I had resources. And eventually, I mean, it didn't take long for my husband to hop on board and we figured it out. But, just a nod to all the women out there who really, truly are doing the best that they can. They're not being believed. They're telling themselves that they should just play small, all of the things that you just said.
They're not even being asked. And,
Yeah.
that sweet checkup is the only time we check up on women in the postpartum period where most of suicides happen.
Yeah.
So this is another thing. But I love that you said that you had to look outside Western medicine. Because I feel like
as a Western trained doctor, I'm looking outside of Western medicine.
But can I just tell you, can we just give major props to the brown people? Everybody, we are rediscovering our own. We're like, hey, we were taught to do this in yoga like way back when. Or so much of the breathing exercises. So much. I'm like, is it really about meditation and yoga? And now turmeric, which is like anti-inflammatory. Have we not been eating turmeric like all day, every day? Yeah. Now it's a turmeric latte, a golden latte at Starbucks. Like, what is going on? I just want to give a shout out. If you're South Asian, especially speak up for yourself. Our people were on to all the smart stuff before everybody else was.
Yeah.
We are truly the chosen ones. No, I actually do believe that. I think our culture and as some bad things and some baggage it might come with so much knowledge. Maybe that's why all the elders in our communities always think they're so great and smart, because they are. They just might be. But it's funny that you said that. As a South Asian American. Yeah. It's so ironic. Yeah. And it helped you so much, right?
It did. And I mean, obviously in tandem with Western medicine, I would never, I'm not going to sit here and say that that's not, Dinesh's wife is in healthcare. I come from that background. My husband is still in healthcare. It can still, and is an important part of an overall game plan
Yeah.
for what it means to be happy and human.
Yes. And
So
it's not one or the other. And you don't have
Yeah.
to be anti-medication. This is one thing I think is a huge stigma in this is a different podcast, but this is another really big problem, I think, stereotype, but in South Asians in general, and this reluctance with medicine, mental health, medicine in general. It doesn't have to be either or, guys. It can be both and. I'm also learning this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go in right there because as you're talking about racism and access that Oprah has and things like that, I recently learned that there really are two different Americas, and
There really
those of
is.
us that live in big cities have a different experience than what the rest of the country is. And even in the area where we are in DC, I'll tell you a quick story. I have a friend who lives in a very successful area, is very successful. And he told me something recently that really caught my attention. He said, if it's the middle of the night and I accidentally trip my home alarm, the cops will come. I have to walk out of my own house with my hands up because they might think I'm the robber, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I was thinking, because we've tripped our alarm in the house and the cops show up and I'm like, what's it to you? It's my house, right? Like, it's fine, like, right?
Dinesh,
But
don't give
just
attitude to the cops.
yeah,
Please.
right. But that really like stuck with me because here's someone who's just like me, just of a different race,
Yeah.
telling me that in their own house, they're afraid of being attacked or arrested or whatever.
Yeah.
So that brings me to the question that I have. What are, aside from sort of in generalities, like speak up for yourself, advocate for yourself, what is the specific 1, 2, 3, 5 step advice you would give from your research to women that are like you, like Seema, like my wife, who understand what the system is and understand that there's work needing to be done to change the system, but also understand that the system is what it is. It's not going to change when you need to go to the ER, right? And the things they need to do to advocate for their health. And I'll tell you why I'm asking this question. Before our first son was born, my wife was had a ruptured ectopic pregnancy. And she was I remember clearly, we're in the living room, 6 weeks pregnant, and just doubles over on the floor in pain. So I take her to the ER and she's sitting there, and with ectopic pregnancy, the pain sort of pulses, right? So the pain got better and she said, let's leave, I think I'm feeling fine. Not 8 hours later, she was having emergency surgery because of a blown ectopic. And I don't think there's anything there other than women needing to believe themselves. Well, no, needing to believe themselves, right?
Believe themselves, yeah.
You say to the women that are listening in the audience, to emphasize and underscore in italics and bold that you need to not only advocate for yourself, but dot, dot, dot. What are those things?
Well, I do say something like that. I do have a couple of steps because, Americans like everything in steps. So top 5 things that I recommend that you do. But the other thing, which is that is such an incredible story. But it also, I feel like Seema and we totally knew because the other thing that story shows is how high her threshold for pain is, which is something that is so frustrating. People know that women have a high threshold for pain. It's like biblical, actually, in the Bible. But then we don't believe women when they say they're experiencing too much of it, or if it's too much for them. What I would tell your wife and other South Asian women that are listening to this podcast is you're not an inconvenience. You are not an inconvenience. And even if you have been told that you are, and even if you've been shown that you are not. And this is a very basic human thing. I actually was having this conversation with my mother recently. I was like, you have to take your health seriously for yourself. I know we've been told to sacrifice to the point that it is ingrained in us. We do think it's an inconvenience for us to be driven to the emergency room. I know so many women like that, and they really believe it. They want to be home in time to what? Make sure the fried chicken is on, all that stuff that's being cooked. Especially, I feel like in our mother's generation, there are some mothers who have passed it on too, because that's what we're told to do. So I would tell South Asian listeners, you're not an inconvenience, and you have a right. There's lots of things that we need to learn from the Goras. And one of this is this sense of entitlement. And I don't want us to have it just to have it, because it might not always work out for us, because hello, racism is a big thing. I don't know if a white man who called the cops to his house would ever have to come out with his hands up. Mm-hmm. But I can guarantee, and I will tell all my black and brown guy friends, just put your hands up. Just put your hands up and be so polite. Okay, because we can't, there's only certain things that I think white people can do. And I will say this, and you can come fight me on this, but I feel like only white people can misbehave with cops in America and still be alive at the end of it. There's actually a very eerie metaphor that a women's health advocate used, blanking on her name, but it was going to deliver as a black woman in America is just as dangerous as being a black man at a stoplight, stopped by the police.
It's a powerful image.
Wow.
Powerful image, but also going back to why the stories are important. And when those white reporters would ask me stuff like, maybe this just happened to you because you're the problem. This is why these stories are so important. Because when you step back, what emerges? A pattern. And then you see, not only you're not alone, but this is a systemic problem. How long for police brutality in these shootings were we told, right? A couple of bad apples. Not all of them. This was a bad black man. No, it's systemic. They've been freaking getting away with murder. It's not very different from what's happening in hospital delivery and emergency rooms. If you see the number of women who were denied life-saving abortions, even white women, this year alone, because of all the abortion laws, and doctors were too scared to touch them or give them the life-saving abortion. What the hell is happening? So this is what is really good now, not good, but what gives me a lot of positivity and hope is how women are together. Women are together. And I feel like with Kamala Harris, I hope white women have also gotten the memo, because we've seen white women for Kamala Harris. We have explained to them really well. Don't mess this election up. You guys are always the people. They historically vote with their race, not with their gender.
So, Anushay, you've shared so many valuable tips, insights. It's so easy to, at least for me as a woman, clearly for Dinesh, he's seeing his own wife, his own daughter potentially, in these stories, and it's really, really insightful. You have accomplished so much. Clearly, this is a passion for you. This is your purpose in life, your dharma, if you will, to talk about this. You've worked with women like Chelsea Clinton, Christy Turlington, Padma Lakshmi, Frida Pinto was on your podcast. You're an L woman of impact among so many other accolades.
That was really funny. I think I was just happened to be at the party, by the way.
Well, either way, you were in the room where it happens.
And you're a Happy and Human podcast guest.
I mean, come on.
Talk about the honors. They're just racking up.
They're just piling in. And my question to you is, with all of the background that you had, right? From where you came to where you are now, who do you have to be as a person in order to achieve all of these things? What are ways you would describe yourself, and what are things you aspire to that really help you, attract all of these amazing experiences?
Good question. Ask you the same thing, but one thing I will say is that I was the youngest in my family. I was bullied at home and bullied at school. I was always bullied, and I just think you got it. I learned very young that you have to speak up for yourself to survive. So I always raise my hand. I always raise my hand, and I have no problem saying me, pick me. But I learned that I think I was taught growing up in Bangladesh that was not a good thing. But in school, because I went to the American school, they always rewarded that. So I picked up very fast that actually no, and it is a good thing to have. And also, I think if you can feel something, honestly, there was a period in my career where I was on TV a lot. And so people thought that that was what I was going to do. And then I wrote the book, and a lot of people back home were like, why don't you on TV anymore? And I was like, when I was on TV leading up to Trump's first presidency, it was a very bad time. And I was I was not a happy person. I was very angry. This man triggered me so much. I can't believe he was bringing all this Islamophobia stuff. I mean, and running his campaign on it and winning. So I just, if something speaks to you, you've got to listen to that voice. Because even though I was still doing media work after my birth trauma story, it was just in me. I was just like, this is an issue I can't stop thinking about. I know I'm not the only one. What is happening in America? Like, this is real. Has anyone investigated? So listen to yourself. Trust yourself. You're so much smarter and stronger than you realize. And frickin' go for it. Mindy Kaling, I love her so much. And she always says, her motto is, pardon my French, why the fuck not me? Why the fuck not me? And I like that attitude. Why the fuck not me? Go for it. Just go for it. One of the things I love the best about living in America is you really can. You really can go for it. So yeah, that's what I would say. But I also just remembered that I didn't say my top 5 quick things that I would tell people to do in a medical setting.
Go for it.
Do it.
Okay. Number 1, do your research. If you feel like this is very complicated and something unique to America because of our insurance system and in network and out of network, and God help us all. But do your research. If you feel like your provider does not believe you or is not listening to you, switch providers. It might be a pain in the ass, but do not continue. Okay? Because if you don't have trust with your provider, and it sounds cheesy to say, it's everything. I have such an incredible GP now. And I think unless you have that kind of a relationship, the whole American healthcare system is going to be kind of difficult for you to access. The other thing I would say is bring your family history with you to the doctor. A lot of people think, and I think a lot of brown people think, that you just go to the doctor and you sit there and the doctor is going to tell you what's wrong and zap. No, your healthcare is actually a team effort. Guess who the most important member of that team is?
You are.
You are.
You guys are the first 2 people ever to answer that question right. But yes, it's you. You know why it's you? Because you are so expert in your body, in your symptoms. And I think a lot of times we actually put ourselves at the very bottom of that list.
Right.
I can't tell you how amazing healthcare and experiences I have since I started approaching it like that. It's a team effort. It's not going to be one place, one-stop shop answer. And especially for women, right, Seema? We got a lot of stuff going on.
Got a lot of stuff.
It's like perimenopause, hyperthyroidism, there's some depression and anxiety thrown on there, generational trauma. We got it all. So that's the thing. And the other thing is change your provider, take somebody with you, and if there's anything that you can do, if there's any kind of policy angle to what you are dealing with or working with, more clinical trial, more women in clinical trials, more diversity in clinical trials, whatever it is, find if there is some legislation or something on it on Capitol Hill. Because this is very Gora, but it's very American.
Yeah.
This is how you change culture in America. Okay, it's not by us having Hindu temples and Ambani weddings. Is there legislation on it on Capitol Hill? Is there some political will on it? And a very old mentor of mine told me this when I first started working in the States after college, and it's so true. Cultural change in America start with policy. So just find if there's something on it for mifepristone access or whatever it is. If you can have a take action item somewhere on your cause or somewhere on your work, that's really important because a lot of times people want to help or people want to get involved and then they don't know like what to do. But it's always really good with a long-term goal like policy and legislation, because I think sometimes, I'm going to sound so American saying this, but I really think Americans don't understand how accessible their democracy is. I mean, I can't believe I was lobbying Congress when I wasn't even a U.S. citizen back then. What the heck? I was like just a Bangladeshi girl on Capitol Hill being like,
Yeah.
I
But
love it. I love
it
it.
matters. And a
Yeah.
lot of us don't know how the system works.
Mm.
Yeah.
And we really gotta get in there. So I would also say that. So listen to yourself, take somebody with you to the doctor's office, know your family history. You are the most important part of the team, and change your provider if you have to, and action on Capitol Hill.
Mm.
I love it. Not only at the macro level of the system, I think a lot of us don't quite appreciate how the micro system works, right? Like the
Yes.
appointment system, things like that. And one of the things that you said that really resonated with me is taking someone with you.
Mhm.
When my mom was in the hospital for 6 months, we got some advice that even if we couldn't be there, hire like a third party caregiver to go in to the hospital and sit with her for a couple hours. And simply because someone else is there, it forces other people to be honest, kind of like having a camera
Like a
in the
witness.
yeah, as a witness.
Totally.
And I think that's true even at the micro level when you're going to the dentist or you're going to the
Yeah.
doctor. Oftentimes, especially with people of color and women of color, there's a power dynamic, right? There's an authority figure, and then there is someone who is there for the service. And just to um, prevent abuse of that power dynamic,
Mhm.
a witness, even if it's someone that is, hired for your
Totally.
care or a friend or someone like that, can do a lot to normalize that
Yes.
power dynamic.
Yes,
Mhm.
and I thank you so much for bringing this up. This is something I wish we had. This is so important because, especially for South Asian women, or even just immigrant women, even just coming from a different country. When I was growing up in Bangladesh, you never questioned the doctor,
Right.
No.
never, and you never question a white man. And now I'm in America, telling everybody to question the white man in power.
Yeah. No.
But it's really important to do that because
Absolutely.
first, it's everything, and you have the right to do it, and you don't have to be rude about it. A lot of
Yeah.
people think that I mean, they're like anti-doctors or anti-medicine, or I'm just telling you to tell your doctor to F off. No, please don't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please be respectful. But
Yeah.
also, when you say advocate for yourself, it is putting your hand up and having somebody there with you. Honestly, I love that you said a witness. That
Mhm.
person could end up being your witness.
Yeah.
Yeah, and quite frankly, it's not only in that setting. The act of learning to advocate for yourself in one setting carries forward. I mean,
Sure.
Malcolm Gladwell wrote the book about 10,000 hours, and he found
Mhm.
that kids who went to the pediatrician office, who were independently having a dialogue with the pediatrician, were more likely to be successful in other areas of life rather than when the parent was talking on behalf of the child. Like, oh,
Yes.
this is what he's doing. You want the doctor to have a dialogue and have the kid to develop the confidence to answer what's wrong with them or how are they feeling. And I think that
Totally.
that spills over, the same thing
Yeah.
spills over into every aspect.
Yes.
Absolutely. And
Totally.
absolutely. And also the other reframe I'd like to add, just revisiting my days as being a provider and, still hearing what it's like for my provider friends is, yes, the system is falling short. And also not every doctor is consciously just falling to that, right? Like we're all doing the best that we can. And
Yeah.
we as doctors too, we want what's best for you. Now, of
Yes.
course, we're going to catch some that are in not their best moments,
Yeah.
and not to say to let anything slide or but really truly, if I knew that I had said something that didn't land with a patient, I was always happy to go back and reframe or give another example or call the daughter or call the son, whatever it was, because many of us, most of us got into this field because we wanted to help. And that's, I believe, the inherent nature of human beings in general. We do want to help.
Yeah.
And so just keeping that in mind from the patient's perspective.
Let me say
Right.
something really quick about doctors in America without being one. Hey, they are tired and burnt out too. Talk about being overstretched. Why
Yeah.
do they
Yeah.
only get 5-10 minutes with you? They have to go. They can't do what they really want to do.
Right.
Right? Spend
Absolutely.
25, 35, 45 minutes with each patient. That's not possible. Like they have to get through. They have boxes they need to check as well. So
Right.
it's systemic.
Yeah.
I mean, you will have those incidences. I mean, a lot of Black doctors have told me, some white people come and say, I don't want this Black BITCH to touch me. Like actual serious racist
Right.
incidences. So, I'm saying that I mean, the doctor landscape is also has many shades.
It's right.
Not
It's a
one.
nuanced, it's a
very
nuanced, multifactorial thing.
there as well.
But it's helpful to know that, for the most part, I think most of us want the best outcome for whatever reason that is. And so, to advocate.
Yes, definitely. Doctors do want the best outcomes. What I will say is hospitals can sometimes be a little different. Hospitals don't want necessarily, I mean, I think they will say that. I don't know if I'm going to get sued for saying this, but hospitals are businesses. People I wish somebody had explained that to me.
Yeah.
Because when I went in and I had my baby, oh my God, in 2011, I was 31. So I'm already, I'm educated, I'm informed. And I at one point told myself, even while I was dying, giving birth in America, there's no way I'm going to die giving birth in America. It doesn't happen.
Anushay, we're just feeling your energy and we're so honored to have had you on our show. But we want to do our fun little wrap up game because it wouldn't be the Happy and Human podcast if we didn't do our wrap up.
I hope it's everyone happy and human. It's a very hopeful topic. Just know that women's health, it is a solvable crisis that we're in.
It is, exactly. Yeah. And that's what we're all here for, right? Is the empowerment, the knowledge that we can do better and how to do better.
Also to understand that women's health is not just women's issue. Right. It's a national issue. It's a human rights issue. Can we get the men here, please? You guys know. I don't know why it's like, we had a fundraiser recently for sex ed at my house, and I put in the invitation, bring a man sex ed party, because we're constantly doing this. We're raising the money. We're getting together. Women know. You don't have to go and write a book about it like I did. Women know, right? They know that we're not being treated equal. But
I think it's our responsibility to make sure that whatever we're doing and whatever we're experiencing isn't experienced by the next generation. I don't think that's a man, woman, white, black, brown, colored.
Correct.
They'll have their own issue. They'll have their own issues, but what am I doing if I'm not trying to solve the problems I faced so that my kids don't have to face them?
Oh, yeah. And you know what makes me really happy when I'm reading and researching and doing what I do? And it's so easy to get like down in the dumps. You're just like, it's happened for so long. Why aren't people getting the memo? And then I look at my girls and I'm like, that doctor that didn't believe me in the operating room wanted me to get up on that table myself. My girls would have taken him to town. They would not have. I bet with the baby between their legs, my eldest would have got up and said, no, you're going to hear me. So I also have so much of, not just for my girls, but this generation. Now I'm going to sound like an oldie, like an old auntie. But I am so proud. They're so smart. They're even like, we don't want to work in the office. They don't even like the office setup. They're like, we're working from home.
Right. I mean, when we were younger, we were told that, an auntie or an uncle wants to give you a hug. You have to go give them a hug.
Yes.
Right. If my daughter is scared and doesn't want to give someone a hug, it is less of an issue of respecting the power dynamic and the elderly person's wishes and more honoring and seeing her fear. Right.
Yes.
That's what it is. When you've got a little kid that doesn't want to hug someone, it's not that they're being disrespectful. Yeah. It's seeing their fear. Right. And if you don't see that fear, you minimize it. You minimize their voice. So next time you're scared, they don't even say it.
Yeah.
But I do think the work we're doing, all of us, all the work we're doing is having an impact.
Absolutely.
Well, you guys have created a platform that I think just wouldn't have been possible. I don't know, maybe in like 1985 America. Can you imagine two brown people? No. People would be like, get these coconuts off the air, right? There would have been some white censorship guy. So just this, not calling this coconut, sorry. The coconut metaphor has gone really far now, and Kamala has taken it somewhere else. It's not meant to be. But this space to just talk like this, I don't think our parents' generation had it. So that's really great, because also being on a show with you guys is like, oh, look, there's other brown podcasters.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
We have so much fun. So if you're new to the show and you haven't listened before, we like to play a game called Ask It Forward, where the previous guest has left a question for you, not knowing who you are or what we're going to be talking about. You get to answer it, Anushay, and then you get to leave a question for the next guest. Are you ready to play? All right. If you weren't doing what you are doing right now, what else would you be doing?
Definitely be depressed in a mental health institution, because I could not imagine doing anything else.
Yeah.
And I'm somebody, I have to do it. I mean, it's on my face. So if I was not doing this and I don't know, being a receptionist somewhere or working in a store, my face would be like this. And I would be so lifeless and joyless.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I would have to ask myself, what do I really want to do, Anushay? Can we do it? Because that is something, I mean, I can't. I'm not one of those people. And I hope I never am one of those people. And respect to those people, because a lot of times their circumstances don't allow. But it was I remember this point in my life. It's just like, this is not going to be my story.
I love that. I love that you are living your dharma. I love that.
Watch me have like a crash after this.
No. We're not going to
on our podcast.
Yeah.
We're not going to manifest that at all.
No.
So then, what is your question for our next guest?
Why did you decide to do this? Say yes, sitting with Dinesh and Seema.
Oh.
Why did you agree to be a guest on The Happy and Human? What is your ulterior? Because let me tell you what my ulterior motive is. Everybody listening to this podcast, go on Apple or Spotify. Please find the Pain Gap podcast. My book is an Audible bestseller. And this, I was very brown when I ventured into podcasting and decided to be so brown about it that my first podcast was called Spilling Chai. And now all the brown people are on chai. They're like, chai? I'm like, no, there can't be spilling. We have stopped spilling chai. We are now the Pain Gap podcast because we interview medical professionals and we interchange those educational podcast episodes with real women's stories of survival and not being believed by their doctors. So please find me, rate me, love me, give me 5 stars, tell all your friends to download it.
So important. So important I never really understood this world until Dinesh and I started podcasting. But and when you author a book, same thing. The reviews actually do matter. Sharing matters. How many times you share a link or find all of these things, because that's what keeps the message going. And so listeners, if you have enjoyed this podcast, please, not only rate and review ours, but absolutely head on over, listen to the Pain Gap podcast, grab your copy of the book, rate, review, share, do all the things, because this is just what keeps the world going.
Gonna be like, then I'm not going to be able to do what I'm doing, right? Then you're not going to see me.
Then you'll be the receptionist.
There's nothing wrong with being the receptionist. There's something wrong with being the receptionist.
You being the receptionist, exactly.
I'd be like, no, you cannot reschedule, actually. No, the doctor is not in. I don't feel like going and getting her.
Yes, exactly.
I'd be fired.
And if one of our listeners walks into some store at some beach and sees Anushay behind the cash register, it'll be because you did not leave a review.
Exactly.
It didn't work out. Thank you guys so much for having me, letting me talk your ear off. You've been so generous with your time. Thank you.